sustainably and to strengthen our sovereignty within a united Canada. As you know, back in February, Alberta's government announced that a referendum will be held in October, seeking Albertans' input on 9 questions concerning Alberta's future. Some of the questions are directly related to immigration and the supports available to new Albertans. The rest of the questions seek direction on working with other like-minded provinces to amend Canada's Constitution. In our view, a referendum is the purest and most direct form of democracy and is the most appropriate way for us to seek the input that we need to act on these important issues. We recognize how consequential these questions are, and we want to make sure that every elector in Alberta has the time needed to consider their vote and get the facts that they need to make an informed decision on the ballot at the ballot box come October. So today I am happy to announce the launch of a new website that will serve as the central source of information on the upcoming referendum. Alberta Referendum 2026.ca provides a detailed, plain language explanation of each of the 9 questions, as well as facts and background information on how our province got to this point. The website cuts through the technical and constitutional language and delivers the fact in an accessible and relatable way. The referendum will be run by Elections Alberta, just like any provincial election. The website we are launching today will include information on when the referendum will take place and how the results will impact our province. Importantly, the website makes it clear what this referendum is and what it isn't. We want Albertans to understand what a yes vote means and the actions our government will take as a result. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My job as Premier of Alberta is to give Albertans hope that Canada can work, because I understand why so many Albertans are incredibly frustrated. This frustration has been building for a long time. Let me put it like this. Since 2015, our province has faced several natural market-driven economic downturns, along with a prolonged artificial one imposed by the federal government under Justin Trudeau. Albertans will not forget that anytime soon. There are many of our province who feel that the federal government has overstepped its constitutional authority in areas of provincial jurisdiction, areas of natural resources, the environment, infrastructure, healthcare, and social services. Another concern that emerged in the last 5 years is the federal government's increasingly unsustainable approach to managing immigration, which is placing real pressure on our province. Now, let's be clear about this. Alberta is no stranger to population growth, and welcoming newcomers has been part of our story since the very beginning. In the past, opportunities in the labour market and economic prosperity have been the primary drivers of our population growth, and that meant our system could sustain new arrivals and their families. This time around, it's different. Affordability and access to key services have factored into people's decisions, placing added strain on housing, healthcare, courtrooms, and our classrooms, resulting in many thousands more new arrivals than our current system can handle. Since 2021, an additional 600,000 people now call Alberta home. That's like adding half the size of Edmonton or Calgary in the last 5 years. It's blown a big hole in our provincial budget and driven up the cost to taxpayers. And it's made it difficult for young people to find jobs. In 2025, the youth unemployment rate in Alberta was 15.6%, a clear sign that youth across the province are struggling to find work. Meanwhile, many employers first look to temporary workers to fill entry-level jobs. Our government has been monitoring these trends. We knew it was time to act, and we wanted a clear picture of how Albertans felt to inform our actions. That's why we launched the Alberta Next panel last summer, a widespread series of engagements aimed at gathering grassroots feedback on the biggest issues facing our province. What we heard in sessions all around the province made our government's mission clear. Albertans wanted us to build an immigration system that is sustainable, and they wanted us to do more to defend Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. And that's exactly what we intend to deliver. But these are big changes we're considering. For a province like ours, whose entire story has been shaped by sustainable immigration, this would be a very different way of doing things. Different enough, in fact, that we believe we need a democratic mandate to move forward. A strong mandate through these referendum questions will give our government the license we need to make legislative changes reflecting the democratic will of Albertans and to work with like-minded provinces towards constitutional reforms. Albertans will have a direct say on how the province should ensure our social services remain accessible for Albertans and which constitutional changes we should pursue to advance Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. Albertans will have the final say, and the website we're launching today will help them to make up their own minds about the path that they wish us to take. But I do want to be clear about the result our government is hoping for in October. We want a strong turnout. We want voters at the ballot box who have considered the facts carefully, and we want a strong mandate to deliver change for Albertans. And with that, I'm happy to take questions. Our Minister of Justice and Attorney General is here as well in case there's any legal questions that he needs to answer.
Perfect. We'll go into our QA. Of course, one question, one follow-up, and please state your name and outlet before asking your question. We'll start off here in the room. Raise your hands. We'll go to Catherine, and then we'll go to Lisa.
Okay, sure. So, Catherine Kelski, All Alberta. So, when you say strong mandate, you want that good voter turnout. If it's close at a low voter turnout, how does that affect the actions your government takes as a result?
Well, I think we'll have some good guidance to go by. We got a 62% mandate on our equalization referendum when that was put forward, although it was at a municipal election, which was relatively lower voter turnout. We tend to get somewhere in the order of 60 to 65% voter turnout in a provincial election. It's a little bit higher in a federal election. So we would like to have the majority of those who can vote to come out, and we'd like a majority mandate from that voter turnout.
And for my second question, it's more of a technical question following up on a question that was asked in question period for Minister Amory. So on the Quebec Supreme Court of Canada decision, you're still waiting. It was an oral decision. You're waiting to see the written reasons and how that technically affects, if at all, Alberta's electoral boundaries process. So how does that impact the timeline of the committee's work and when the new maps will be ready? And
yeah, well, look, it's not going to impact the timelines of the new advisory panel and the work that they intend to do. Quebec's law differs very much from Alberta's. I want to make that clear. In Quebec, the applicable law provides that a final report of the Boundaries Commission in that province comes into effect automatically on the without further intervention from the legislature. Now, here in Alberta, we have a much different process. The Boundary Commission here produces a final report, which is then presented to the legislature, of course. If the legislature decides to approve the final report, then it must pass a separate law to implement the final report. But there are also additional options, of course. There's a robust debate process that happens here in Alberta, along with the option for amendments to come onto the floor as well. And so the factual context of what we're looking at when it comes to Quebec's legislation and Alberta's legislation is very different.
Correct. And then we'll go to Lisa.
Thanks. Lisa Johnson with Canadian Press. This is for the Premier. A lot of the 9 referendum questions that we saw in February were kind of ambiguous in terms of the details, right? Like we didn't know what is a reasonable fee for non-permanent residents, that kind of thing. And forgive me, I haven't had a chance to look at the website, so I don't know if this stuff is addressed in detail there. But I'm wondering if you can kind of explain how that is a different policy or a policy that moves beyond what we saw in the Immigration Oversight Act, which, like, there's one question, do you support Alberta taking increased control over immigration, et cetera, et cetera. And the Immigration Oversight Act did take more control, provincial control over immigration. So can you talk about how the referendum question, the policy involved there might go beyond that specific legislation?
Sure. There's a few things I'd say. So when we look at the Canada-Quebec Act from 1991, so that's the agreement where Quebec has control over their economic migration, they have an agreement to bring in migrants through the whole process from work permit to permanent status, and then the federal government determines citizenship. So that is the kind of model that we would be looking at if we get a mandate from the people. That's one part. The other is that we believe that we should return to what guest workers were meant to do. Guest workers were meant to provide additional revenue for the province, and they were also meant to fill gaps that couldn't be filled by Alberta workers or Canadian workers. And I think we've gotten quite a far way from that kind of approach, especially when we look at the dollars. We did a rough calculation of what guest workers and their families cost our system, and it's about a minimum of $400 million when we look at ER and doctor visits as well as surgeries. There were 35,000 visits in the 2024 year that we looked at. That may be higher in 2025. We have 45,544 children of temporary workers who are in our education system. That's another 600 million. Social services like childcare subsidy, Alberta Child and Family Benefits, student aid, we estimate will cost $100 million for temporary residents. So we're well over $1 billion in cost, and yet in that same year, those same temporary workers generated $150 million in tax revenue. And that's not how it's supposed to work. We're actually supposed to generate more revenue than the cost associated with supporting those workers. So that's why we're looking at how they would pay for a healthcare premium, as well as ensuring that maybe they leave their kids at home until they're prepared to make a permanent commitment to Canada and be a permanent taxpayer. If you're a temporary worker, then you're here temporarily. If you're a guest worker, you're here as a guest. If you're a student, you're here, once again, temporarily. You shouldn't be coming to Canada expecting that you're going to be able to take more taxpayer-funded supports than you're generating in revenue. So that's another area that we're looking at, is how do we equalize those things. And then there's another one about asking for a proof of citizenship during votes as well. And so those are kind of the main things that we would be looking at, and all of that is described on the website.
Gotcha. And show of hands again.
Can I get a follow-up?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, quick follow-up on that. So you mentioned the Alberta Next panel.
Yeah.
And you also said you believe that you need a democratic mandate to move forward with these policies. But when you started the Alberta Next panel, you also said we were hoping to get referendum questions out of it. Sometime, I think it was in Grand Prairie, you said, well, we might move ahead with some of these things anyway. We've heard enough on some of these issues. So is there a scenario in which you can foresee moving ahead on some of these things before the October referendum? Or are we in a
Well,
freeze?
I think what you're seeing with Bill 26, part of that is trying to get a handle on who is hiring temporary workers. I mean, that's really that came more from some of the feedback that we got from our various cultural communities, that they feel that there isn't enough enforcement when somebody has advertised a job. If they don't live up to those commitments, there hasn't been an enforcement mechanism that is satisfactory to make sure that they are paying the right fee, that the job is what it said it is. So we're trying to balance both sides. That if we are bringing temporary workers in, then they should be getting the job that they bargained for. So we have to make sure that immigration consultants are appropriately explaining what the job is, and that the workers who are hiring, or the businesses that are hiring them, are delivering on what they promised as well. So that's one part of it. When I said that there's some things that we wouldn't move forward on, like, for instance, there wasn't an appetite for personal income tax, taking that over. There wasn't an appetite to put forward the motion on Alberta pension plan, I think because people just don't know enough about what that would mean. So those are ones that you'll see are not on. We are proceeding with developing our sheriff police service. We determined, 80% of Albertans are already governed by municipal forces. And so this really was an issue that affects 20% of the population. So it needed a bit of a different approach, and we're doing an opt-in approach. So those who want to have a different police service is going to be able to. So that's what I meant when I said that when we did our consultation, we heard the recommendations. Not everything is suitable for a province-wide referendum, but we think these ones are.
But to be clear, you're ruling out pursuing any of these policies until after the
Correct. I want to make sure that we've got a mandate from Albertans, because it is a departure from what we've done in the past.
We'll go to Will, then Sarah, and then hopefully Emmanuel after that.
Hi, Will Vassar with the Western Standard. This kind of builds off Lisa's question, but a lot of these questions on the referendum, especially immigration, are a lot of what you guys have been advocating for throughout this term for you guys. And so my question would be, if Albertans come back and they vote no, especially on your immigration questions, how would that affect or adapt your guys' next year in office ahead of the 2027 election?
Well, I think people need to understand that guest workers are costing more than they're generating in revenue, and we want to be able to balance that. not only by having fewer temporary foreign workers so that young people and Albertans have jobs first, but also so that we can do that balance. So we're going to be advocating for these positions. I mean, they are government-sponsored questions. So I'm not going to just be a bystander in this. We're going to be out actively persuading the public that this is the direction we want to go, but we want an endorsement from them. And so I think people need to understand exactly what it is we're asking, and they'll give us direction. But I'm pretty confident from the consultation that we did that there's a high level of support for these. But again, you only get a small number of people who participate in surveys, a small number who participate in polls, a small number that participate in the in-person meetings. Sometimes you just need to have a broader mandate, and that's why we're doing it. But I'm anticipating that we will get an endorsement, and then we'll be able to move forward on it. If we don't, then we'll address it at that time.
Say, follow up off that, will you accept the will of the majority whatever way these questions go? Or if they don't go the way you guys are hoping, one or two of them, would you still pursue them despite?
Well, I'm of the view that you ask people questions that you want to get the answer to so that you can act on them. And so I'll judge it at that time, but it's also the reason why we put questions that we think we already have the majority of Albertans on board with, but we'll have to see if that turns out to be the case or not. And it's why we didn't put a certain number of questions on the ballot, because it wasn't clear that Albertans wanted to go in that direction. So we think we've done that initial culling of the questions to make sure that we found the ones that are likely to get majority support. But I'm asking them so that I can get a mandate. And if I don't get a mandate, then we'll have to address what we do at that time.
Thank you. We'll go to Sarah and then Emmanuel.
Thank you. Sarah Comodino with Global News. When it comes to the citizen-led initiative questions, is there a deadline for when that can appear? Like, can we expect to see a separation question on this referendum still, or a Forever Canadian question?
I think the deadline would be June 10th, because that's when Corb Lund's coal petition gets its signature requirements. So we have to wait and see whether he has the requisite number of signatures. And then there's a verification process, which I think with Forever Canada was actually quite quick. I think they were able to verify those signatures within 4 weeks. But I think with the signature collection period ending June 10th, by mid-July, we should know whether those signatures are verified. That would kind of be the frame. I don't think there's no new petition that could start now that would be able to get on the ballot. And of course, we're waiting for the result from the courts in May to see, because the court has paused the validation of signatures pending their on the APP one, pending the judgment, which we're expecting sometime in May.
Do you expect, because we're talking about voter turnout and getting people to the polls, how do you see this website actually increasing that, getting people out there and getting engaged with these conversations so you have that majority vote outcome?
Well, I suspect what will happen is that there'll be a yes side and a no side on each of these questions, and there'll be a variety of different third-party groups that are advocating for the reasons for and against these different questions, and we'll of course be advocating for all of these questions as well. We hope that people will be able to read about it in the newspaper, go online, we'll do some social media, we'll do some advertising, we'll continue to do our town halls, and the work of our MLAs will take place over the course of the coming months. We have a lot of opportunity over the summer with the various festivals and events to talk to people about this, and then once we're back in to the fall, when people start turning their attention back to politics, we're very hopeful that we'll be able to get over 50% voter turnout on these questions.
Thank you. We'll go to Emmanuel, then we'll go to Connor.
So this is a government website. It was, I guess, written and coded by public servants.
Yeah.
It was paid for using taxpayer money. How do you justify using taxpayer money to try to convince Albertans to vote a specific way in a referendum, the way that you would prefer, which is a yes?
Yeah, because these are government motions. These are government policies that we want to get a mandate on. So being that we are, as a government, are looking to a mandate, it's entirely appropriate that it would be government resources. There is also citizen-initiated questions, and if any of those are affirmed, then we'll have a tab on the site so that people are able to see what those are, and it'll likely click through to the various citizens' petitions and so people can get information as well. But these are clearly policies that we would like to get a mandate from, So I'm not neutral in it. I think these are the right policies for Albertans. I think it makes sure that we protect youth unemployment, make sure that Albertans get jobs first, make sure it protects Alberta taxpayers. On the constitutional questions, I think it goes back to the original intention of the division of powers in our government, and I think, or in our form of government. And I'm hoping to start a national conversation the way we did with the equalization petition that started a national conversation about whether equalization ought to be reformed. And I hope that these will also, if we get a mandate, start a national conversation on the role that we have in the judiciary appointments, the role that we have, whether the Senate should still exist, and whether there needs to be more deference for the federal government in our areas of provincial jurisdiction. So I'd like that to also start a national conversation as well. So we'll be advocating very strongly for all 9 questions.
Yeah. And you mentioned a national conversation. Kind of want to address the elephant in the room in my perspective, the question of independence.
Yeah.
When you talk to people, whether they be politicians or voters, whether it be in Alberta or outside of Alberta, when you talk about a referendum in the fall, most people already assume that independence is going to be on the ballot. Why not just do it? Just choose a question that is clear, put it on the ballot right now so that conversation can actually start. You can have a yes and a no camp. Why not do it today?
Well, because my position is that we should remain in Canada. That's the position of our government. We believe that we should assert sovereignty within a united Canada. So that is our policy. And so others are putting forward a proposal that would have a different position. And so it would not be a government-sponsored question. It would be one that would be a citizen-initiated response. And so we're waiting to see if the court will affirm that and allow the signature collection to go to be validated. But I don't want to prejudge what the court's going to do. I believe they're going to be making their decision in May.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go to Connor next.
Going back to what you were saying about getting strong voter turnout in terms of something comparable to a general election, do you believe that there are going to be any deterrents in specifically, some of the wording of some of these questions, the fact that some of them need explanations on the website, as well as the people potentially distrusting whether or not the government will respect the results of the referendum when, just in the last couple of days, the government has backtracked on a topic that was previously voted on by Albertans in a similar one?
Well, we did learn from the daylight savings question that you can't ask a double-barreled question because you don't know what people are saying yes to and no to. I suppose if we could have done it again, we probably would have asked, do you want to end the time change, yes or no? And do you want it to be standard time year-round or daylight time year-round? That's probably how it should have been asked in the first place. And so I think that's why it created some murkiness about what the result actually meant, as people were sitting there trying to figure out what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to. So I would say that what you'll see with our questions is we try to have a single idea in each question, so it's a clear yes or no. That's how we're trying to manage, making sure that we don't have any kind of confusion in the way the question's being asked.
Okay. Also, I apologize, my follow-up is unrelated. It's for the Justice Minister. It's related to the releasing of one of the members of the Surrey Six from a prison in BC to Edmonton. I'm just hoping to get your opinion on that, and there are concerns about safety for the community.
Yeah, look, the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services has been doing a remarkable job in making sure that public safety is always paramount, as have I, and we work very closely together in that continuum of making sure that the criminal justice system is operating effectively. I've got no concerns. I have faith in the Minister. I know that he is going to be able to keep community safety and the public at the forefront, and I know that Albertans have reaped many rewards of the public policies that we brought forward in the criminal justice system and our tough on crime policies. We have continuously brought forward legislation, policies, and procedures, both within the public safety sphere as well as the justice sphere as well, to make sure that this province is no safe haven for anybody, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. We'll take one more from the room. We'll go to Michelle, and then we'll go to the phones.
Michelle Bellefontaine, CBC. I just wanted to clarify something, Premier, just an answer you gave earlier. So information about the APP petition and the Cole petition, if they are approved, you indicated there'd be some links. Would that information be on the website, or would you link out to their websites? I'm just trying to understand if you're this site is going to be like a sort of an all-round kind of comprehensive resource for people.
Yeah, my intention would be to have a separate tab that might link through to what the landing page for official documents. Like, for instance, Thomas O'Cassic's, there's a landing page that explains the rationale and explains what the question is and explains that he asked for a referendum. So that would be the kind of thing that if the committee agrees that this one should go on, we'd have the rationale that's been submitted and approved on an official government source that we would link through to. That would be my intention.
Okay, so this website is going to be solely government petitions, government questions. Okay,
So
thank you.
the information backgrounders will be solely government information, but we want to be able to have, they need to understand that if there are affirmed citizen petitions, what those are. And I think that this document provided by Elections Alberta makes a pretty clear statement without us taking a position on that.
Thank you. And now we'll head over to the phones. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
We have a question from Chris Varco from Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. This is a question off topic, but I wanted to ask you about the discussions that have been going on for a while now regarding the MOU with the federal government on tier and carbon pricing. Are you any closer to a deal with Ottawa, or are you concerned about a deadlock right now?
We're making progress. I did have to intervene a couple of days before the April 1st deadline to understand why our teams had not been able to reach an agreement. And we found that there was at least one important outstanding piece of discussion that they had to have. And they've been meeting and pursuing and to try to get to some agreement on that. But the broad brushstrokes of what we're all aiming for is in the MOU, and an effective price of 130. It's just a matter of how quickly we get there and what the stringency will be on the benchmarking on the industry. Those are kind of the things that we still just have a little bit more work to do, but we have made some progress. The other issue is around contracts for differences. That was the issue that we didn't have written into the MOU, but the Prime Minister clearly felt that that's one way to get to effective pricing. We have to make sure that those contracts for differences don't end up costing the industry or Alberta taxpayers or Alberta ratepayers a significant amount of money. So those are mechanisms the federal government has used in the past. We've used them before. For instance, the NDP signed contracts for differences with the wind and solar companies, guaranteeing them 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And so being that electricity is only trading at 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, taxpayers are paying about $100 million a year to compensate those companies on the contracts for differences. So we have a little experience with contracts for differences that have demonstrated that you have to be very careful about how you draft that language. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about now.
And just to follow up, Premier, there's been reports this week that the federal government prefers a southern route into British Columbia for a new oil pipeline rather than one that would go to the northern route. What is your reaction to that, and how would that affect the viability of the government's proposal?
I think people are forgetting the discussion that happened with Trans Mountain in the first place. I mean, one of the big discussions was around how many additional tankers could go through a very congested port. And there was some discussion around it being 34 a month. So now we're already talking about increasing that with the Trans Mountain pipeline, looking like it's going to get the go-ahead to go out to another 360,000 barrels. I guess the question would be, in a very congested port like that, is there an appetite for a doubling once again of that amount of traffic? And so that's why I'm a bit skeptical that would be the appropriate route. We're looking for a route that would get us to a deep water port with very little navigation needed for channels and a rapid way of getting to South Korea and Japan and other Asian markets. And when you look further up the coast, you can cut 3 days off transatlantic or trans-Pacific transit. So that's why we still favor some of the sites where you would get a deep water port, and we're very conscious of the fact that there is a lot of congestion already in that port.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Next question is from Robert Tuttle from Bloomberg News. Your line is open.
Yes, hi. I have a question, follow-up to what was just said. I'm wondering, do you feel that you've before you signed this MOU, and after. I'm wondering how much you consulted with industry in regard to their buy-in to investing all this money, not just in the carbon capture, but also in investment to fill the pipelines, and then willingness to absorb this higher carbon price. I'm wondering if you feel like you've sufficiently consulted with them ahead of time.
I would say there's a difference of opinion in industry. When we froze the carbon tax at $95, we did do an extensive consultation at that time to get a sense from industry of whether we should have rolled it back, kept it at that level, or allowed it to go higher. And I think almost all, with the exception of one or two, said that 95 was about the right price. So we went into the negotiations with that in mind, that that's a price that they can afford to pay right now. But we also were we got pretty clear feedback that going to 170 by 2030 would be too fast, too high, especially in the marketplace that we find ourselves in today. I mean, keep in mind, I think last year the Quebec trading market had carbon pricing at $41. I think the California market's now at $27. So for us to be at 95 is already well above other jurisdictions. And so that's what we're being mindful of. Many of these energy companies are on both sides of it. Not only are they going to have to pay it, but they're also recipients of revenues when they invest in emissions reduction technologies. And so that's part of the reason why we have some companies that are on board with the idea of a carbon price. But there are others who aren't. Let's be frank about it. The Americans don't have this. There are no other energy-producing nations in the world that have this kind of tax structure. But this is kind of the nature of what we're having to pay because the Liberals got elected, and this is a priority for the government of Canada. And so if we're going to get new pipeline access built, then we recognize that we've got to meet them part way.
Thank you. And was there a follow-up? Sorry. That was it. And then, sorry, we have time for one more question. Operator, put through our next caller, please.
We have Don Britt from Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Premier, I thought you said a little while back something that indicated Lukasik's Forever Canadian petition might actually be on the ballot. We know he checked the policy box. We know it's before the committee. All of this seems quite murky, but are you suggesting that you might put him on the ballot? And if you put that question on the referendum ballot, and if you did, would that obviate being able to put this? Is it possible you might actually have the separatist question and that question on the referendum ballot on October 19th?
Yes, I mean, that's what the committee is looking at right now. So the box he checked, if you go and look at the document that I put up, it says a legislative or policy proposal required a signature of 10% of electors on post-election day list. And the alternative was a constitutional referendum proposal that talked about a 20% threshold. That was the distinction before we made them both the same. But if you look at how he structured this, he said the applicant is motivated by the fact that Alberta's separation from Canada is being actively discussed. Since a referendum appears to be imminent anyway, it should be objective and not directed by special interest groups. Separation will threaten the Canadian as well as the Alberta economy, the personal wealth of Albertans, the Canadian citizenship rights of Alberta residents, the treaty rights of our First Nations, and have many other serious and negative consequences. We believe the majority of Alberta residents are loyal Canadians and opposed to any form of separation. Therefore, we, as represented by the signatory and applicant below, propose a referendum on the following question. Do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? So we had 450,000 people sign onto this expecting a referendum. So I know that the proponent has changed his mind afterwards, saying he just wants it to go to the legislature, but that's what we're having to talk to Elections Alberta about, to justice officials about, because it does seem to me that this is kind of a legal process initiated in a legal way with precise language that people signed on a certain expectation. And so we're just trying to get some direction from the committee on that. They've had their first meeting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come back with.
So you are open to having that Forever Canadian petition on the ballot if it meets all these requirements? I'm assuming that's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
And then what do you do, though, about the separatism referendum? Because one of the things in the legislation is that you can't have two questions on basically the same subject. Would you also expect the separatist question to be on the October 19th ballot.
Well, I guess we have to see what the court determines in May, because they're the ones who have asked for this one has validated signatures, so that's one thing I would say. But we'd have to wait and see what the court has to say about that particular question, and they've asked for the validation to be paused until the judge has a chance to issue her report. So that's what we're waiting for, and we're waiting to see what her guidance is.
Thank you, and that'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.